confusion.
Yeah, and it makes us so unhappy.
It's okay.
I know.
Of course.
I think we've nearly lost everything.
No, I think they're
Oh, no.
Something to this.
We're happy to. Yeah, no, that's what we want to do. We want to exactly.
Okay, can we all take our seats, please? Let's resume. We are live. That's why we can't wait for too long.
Come on, Sophia, we're live, Sophia.
Thank you. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We will continue for another maybe 15 minutes or so, just discussion really. So we had a couple of questions from before prayers, and one was about that TV. Actually, interrupt. We're going to try to play the video first, 32 steps. So let's try that.
So yeah, more information about 32 steps. But a few people here today in this video.
32 Steps to Togetherness is a manual of 32 actions that we as individuals can take to build connections in our own lives, but also to build a sense of togetherness more generally. Today is about really understanding our thinking, review the manual further to make it an anti-racist resource, and develop more and more ideas about how it's going to work, trying to build this grassroots movement around togetherness. At the European Network of Religion and Belief, we were very excited to find out about the 32 Steps to Togetherness. So what we tried to do was make a European version. We had different online workshops with youth from different countries across Europe, and we collaboratively reviewed the steps to make sure that they were appropriate for each reality.
We can use the tools in the 32 Steps to know anti-racist movement, and of course bringing us together.
Building social connection is the answer to both loneliness and social fragmentation, and the only way to build authentic connections between people and communities is from the bottom up.
Europe is a mosaic of very different and diverse realities. What we tried to achieve with this Europeanized version of the manual was a culturally neutral resource.
It's a universal document. We believe that everyone can add their contributions to the manual. It applies to our life every day.
When I look at the 32 Steps, what I see is solidarity. And I think in the anti-racist movement across Europe, what we need is solidarity. Solidarity across the different kinds of manifestations of racism.
A lot of what the tool does is break down those steps that kind of reconnect people.
This opportunity, the Steps Togetherness, is going to be really exciting as we go into communities and see how they can develop them with us.
Inequality and discrimination is still a big thing. Racism is still a big thing, and that's something we always try to target with this steps. It's a lot to get together and promote that friendship and relationships between people. It's exciting. There's a lot of potential.
I think it used to feel like a non-political thing, connecting people and promoting a sense of unity felt like a very apolitical thing to be talking about, but things have changed so much around it that it does not feel like there is a kind of political edge to some of the themes that we're talking about today. I don't know how I feel about that, but if talking about togetherness is political, but let's get out of the hole.
Thank you. Slightly
done that justice.
Slightly speed up to save us time here. So good strategy. But I'm sure you can watch that. It's on the website,
it's on
the CSC website, so you can watch that later on. Anyway, let's resume. We'll take another 15 or so minutes. We had a question before about GB News. I think Liz was very keen to address that. So over to you, Liz.
Yeah. Well, you asked a question about whether our report was taken up in the media, and a little bit of a confession. We didn't target the media because, there's something. I have to confess. Is that all right? I'm not a very well-versed religious person.
Okay.
But there's a little bit that I remember from the Bible which says, ask and you shall receive. And I'm sure there's something similar to in the Quran. The thing is, if people are not going to listen, should you expend your energy talking to them? And I think there's two things here. that the media are so much part of a problem, and if you go to them and tell them that they are racist and their frameworks are racist, you're going to get a very hostile reaction. And I'll give you an example. I was in Belfast at the height of the riots in Belfast, and it was really awful there. It was really awful. And as I said earlier, the violence continues. And myself and a colleague from the Irish Network Against Racism were asked to go on BBC Ulster. Got to the studio at 7:30 in the morning in the pouring rain, and literally I was ambushed by the journalists. There were two. It was a radio thing. Yeah, and it was like 5 minutes of hell for me. I talked about the far-right riots. Well, how can you prove that they're far-right riots? You know, how do you know that they're far-right riots? And then I said something about sort of media racism and frameworks, and then they said, but these people have legitimate grievances, and you're closing down on debate, you're censoring everything. And literally that was the reception that you received at the height of a racist riot. And I know some people will talk about the riots, they feel that they were a pogrom. But I think that we have to be careful with language, but I would certainly say that it was a warning, and it was a pre-pogrom situation, and I said that on the radio. And to be in Belfast in a pre-pogrom situation and be talked to like that and questioned like that with this shock jock journalists, it was a really intimidating and harsh experience. So it gives me an answer to your question, but it's not just what GB News and Talk TV and all these things are problematic for sure, and they are brainwashing people, but the real problem is foxification of BBC. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Liz. Okay, so let's open up for more discussion. So before the prayers, I said that there's someone in the room called Rubina Rahman. And Rubina Rahman, she'll tell her own story. She was a victim of Islamophobia a few months ago. And she can talk about that now also, and maybe ask a question from that. Yeah. So over to you.
I have a few things to say
okay.
Other than that.
Sure.
Yes, just in April, a group of us were approached by a man who started coming out with things about Israel and Palestine.
Yeah.
And then he, thank you. And then he very quickly started saying some vile Islamophobic things to us. Now, my group was white, black, and brown. Some were Muslim, some weren't Muslim, some came from Christian backgrounds, atheists. But because some of us were wearing keffiyehs, he felt that he had he was kind of emboldened to say what he wanted to say towards us because of the things that our government ministers have been saying about the pro-Palestinian marches. So it took us a lot of effort to have him charged, convicted and sentenced. He got a very light sentence, he got a 12-week suspended sentence, but because it was recorded and it had gone viral internationally, there was a lot of pressure on the police and local MPs to take action. And I honestly believe that had it not gone viral, had it not been recorded, nothing would have happened, nothing would have come of it. And I say that because I know of many other cases where nothing has happened. And despite it going viral, despite it being recorded, we still had a lot of work to do to ensure the police did their job. And it got to the point where we were passed around different agencies, the victim support, care officer, the police officer in charge, until I reached out to Islamophobia Response Unit, and they were absolutely brilliant. They helped me raise a complaint with the CPS. The CPS passed it on to the Met Hate Crime Unit, which is fairly a new unit in London, and they were really good. And they wanted it to go to criminal proceedings, but the CPS stopped it at the magistrates, so he only got a 12-week suspended sentence. But beside that, I wanted to say that in terms of your report and what impact will it have on our current government, considering we have people like Nigel Farage in our government now, somebody who has previously said that the Muslims want to kill us, and that was discussed on the Trevor Phillips show, and he made excuses and it was said he was taken out of context. But we know the sort of rhetoric the Reform Party used. There was secretly recorded where one member said that he would like to see people shoot at boats coming across the English Channel. So, I mean, when we have people like that in government and Islamophobia is so normalised, the language of Islamophobia is so normalised, what impact do you think your report will have? So that's one thing I wanted to mention. And also, you mentioned that diverse communities need to come together. I feel the pro-Palestinian marches, the movement has brought lots of communities together, including the white working class community. I have met people from all different backgrounds. I've worked with Stamp to Racism, I work with the Palestine Solidarity campaign, and it has been absolutely brilliant at unifying people. What's causing division is the rhetoric coming from our government. And that's what's causing division. And underlying anti-Palestinian hate is really Islamophobia, deep-seated Islamophobia, I'd say. And I'd also like to ask, do you feel that the dehumanization of Muslims, do you feel it has a wider purpose in terms of our foreign policy and what's happened in Iraq, Afghanistan, Palestine, and other countries? And something else I wanted to quickly add, I've been teaching for about 27 years now. My first school that I taught at was a white working class school. Myself and a black teacher were the first ethnic minority teachers in that school. We faced a lot of racism. Mine was more Islamophobia. And that was the time I think the BNP were around. And my colleague stayed until Christmas, one term, because it was just too much for her. I stayed and I completed the academic year. But reaching out to communities is very hard when they are so hostile towards you. At some point, it gets too much. And I felt at that time that the staff at the school were sympathetic to the Islamophobia and the racism that we were receiving. And there were lots of excuses made, as if they were somehow justified to be feeling uncomfortable with us teaching their children. So, I mean, how do we overcome that? What support is there for people who do try to take these 32 steps and reach out? And I feel that the onus isn't just on us, because I think the ethnic community in this country has done an awful lot, but what would you suggest that the white working class community can do, the government can do, to help them reach out towards the ethnic minority and make the ethnic minority feel more comfortable? Thank you.
That's very, very good. Do you need this?
Thank you very much for sharing your story and also some of the questions. Thank you. We'll address those. Are there any more questions from the floor before we pass on? Anyone else? If not, we'll deal with these questions quickly. So the first one about impact of the report on government. Any quick responses?
Sorry?
The impact of your report on the current government?
I don't think anyone or any one report is going to have an influence on government. It's sad to say. It's all down to us. And it's not, I mean, it's not down to, it's not going to be achieved by any one report or any one organisation. And I think in the Stephen Lawrence campaign, maybe there's a lesson from that, because that was lots of people from lots of different organisations coming together and bringing about historical change. And that's all the lessons from history, is that change comes from below. It's this thing about listening. I've been around a long time, and I can tell you that politicians will be on this platform when they know that they're going to lose their seat if they're not on this platform. So it's what we do together. The strength is in us. There is only us. And I think that we can't be blindsided by the fact that it's a Labour government. Nothing has changed. The power is moving to us. in lots of ways. And I think your example of the Palestinian demonstrations showed that actually power is moving. What happens in Parliament is no longer as interesting as what happens in the street and what happens in the grassroots and what happens in communities. And to sort of answer that point about foreign policy and how in this latest itineration of Islamophobia, it all started with the war on terror. It all started with September the 11th, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and now Palestine. The point was that they moved to silence Muslim voices, because Muslim voices were the voices critical of the war on terror and critical of the invasions and critical of the wars. But if more and more other communities join, as they have done with Palestine solidarity marches, that will lessen, hopefully, the sense of isolation. And I just wanted to say we do have somebody here, if it doesn't mind me saying, from NAMOD, which is a Jewish organisation that have been very, very active in the marches for Palestine and against what's happening in Gaza. So that is another example of actually how communities are pulling together despite this divisive rhetoric of the government.
Thank you very much. And just to echo, I mean, we've been working with David for a long time. You know, the support we get from NAMOD is just tremendous. And it's continuous also. It's not just one season they offer support, then for the rest of the year they're not there, but they've been continually supporting us. So thank you, David, and your team. Can I maybe go to Hussein Hung Pai? She, if you don't mind me picking on you, so you wrote a book. She actually wrote she wrote a book, several books. One of them is about angry white people. And for that, she interviewed people like Tommy Robinson, EDL, the skinheads, and others. So maybe you can answer the question about, you know, the white working class. You know, how do we address that? Any quick thoughts?
Actually, that's the question I want to ask Mark. I think Mark, I'm not sure. I mean, I haven't got really anything to say.
I'll add through something to the mix as well, just to highlight that I guess there's a lot of people who are already on side. So we've come to really like the expression "work with the willing" in our organisation, with in the same spirit of what you said, Liz, about, you know, is there any point wasting your energy trying to talk to people that won't be listening to you? We've focused on working with the willing, and so maybe just to highlight that existing strength as well. And I know Mark has a strong desire to find an answer to this question, if not the answer.
Yeah, it seems like a life journey about how do we engage with white working class people and try and make them be the people they could be in a collaborative way and decolonize their minds, because it makes them very, very sad. I was saying that to Liz earlier. It does make a lot of people very sad because they just don't really understand how the world works. I mean, I've been doing that for quite a long time. I've been elected sometimes. I've not been elected quite a few times. But I was a councillor for 21 years, predominantly for a white working class community. You know, I was able to do that. And I think, just coming back to the point that, you know, how do you do it? You really have to be straight talking with people. You have to take them on. But on every doorstep, it's really hard work, and that's why there does need to be the collaboration and the coalitions to do that work. Because once you start sort of talking to people and explaining things a bit better, they go, oh, yeah. You know, because they're not really hearing a different sort of set of arguments, you know. So I'm talking about non-metropolitan, non-urban, young London or Manchester or what have you. I'm talking about that England that really is out of sorts, you know. And there I am. I'm from Portuguese, Sephardic heritage. That's my heritage. So I'm not quite them, even when I'm engaging with those sort of people on their doorsteps. But I think the work can be done. I'm very excited about the grassroots politicians that are coming through as a response to, in many ways, the drift to the right of the Labour Party, which I think is really sad, and it's not telling people what it needs to tell people, and it's not engaging them we have a government elected on less than 34% of the vote, on a turnout of 60% nationally. That does not bode well. It really doesn't bode well. Reform got 21%. So it doesn't need many votes to change on a low turnout with people disengaged politically to see a Reform government in 4 years' time. Sorry, I mean, it's not out of the question, is it? You're seeing, obviously, in German elections, something really horrific happening in Thuringia and Saxony. Horrifically happening. Yeah, this is neo-Nazis. And I think what I thought was quite powerful, about some of the people talking tonight, call it what it is. This is fascism. And we have seen it in East London. We have seen these things. They happened in Dagenham, and they were seen off. You can do it. But I think you really need to engage, grassroots people in politics and be out there telling people the truth. It isn't really like this. Don't listen to those lies, yeah? And it can't be, as loads of people said to me during the election, just throwing a leaflet through their door, getting lost with the pizza or delivery thing. It's got to be talking to people. I actually had a French journalist who joined me in Haverhill, and he was going, "This is amazing. You're talking to people about politics, and this is so important." And I had the young 30-something couple in Haverhill, and they came to the door and they said, they'd never voted, 34. They said, "But what is it? How do we do it? We don't understand." And I thought, that is just tragic. Where does democracy go in that? Working class people, good people, wanted to do the right thing by the community, just didn't understand how anything worked. And there were so many people like that. So I think that's a real work we've got to do. Because all they can be, I wrote a poem about this, by the way, I write poems, but all they can be is angry. They literally run out of their doors. They're tearing your leaflet up. They've not looked at it, they've not read it. But they've had no engagement. It's so, so sad to see it and witness it firsthand. And I'm sure you've done your politics yourselves across the... But, we've really got to do some work with those people because they are so open to radicalisation and being misled so quickly and, in a sense, panicking.
We live in Tower Hamlets, and every day we see, delivery riders, drivers, people from ethnic minority backgrounds or from other countries, migrant workers. In our borough, we see every day people working, badly exploited or working long hours. They're angry too, right? They are marginalized, very marginalized. I have this little thing about when we're talking overemphasizing the white working class, talking, I don't know, this is a question in my mind, I'm not sure when we're talking so much about white working class. We also have people around us who are working class, who are minority backgrounds and who are marginalized. And they're not going around burning people's houses, right? And they're not doing those things.
Can I just add one thing to that? And I haven't got the microphone. Yeah. Okay. Just one thing I would want to add to that, and I think it was on Sophia's point as well. There's this toxification of just pure anger and against feminism as well. It kind of these things collide, and they as I say, a lot of people just can't quite. They can't adapt.
I'll come to you. Did you want to say something? Since the mic is there.
I guess just that one point about how do you that dilemma between these people have agency and we want to engage and we want to bring them on board and de-radicalise them, but then where's the limit between doing that and the fact that they have agency and we have to confront that as well, that they're making these choices. Where is the boundary there? Just to follow up on that question.
Yeah. I'll address them because I think it's also very much related to the point I wanted to raise, and I echo. I'm sorry I didn't catch your name, but I echo your point about. Again, I'll go back to that these are structural issues, right? And I think that while it is important to do community work and engage with different communities, but for such a very long time we've been given excuses to white violence. We've been saying people do not understand how the world works, we need to talk to them, but these are not babies. These are adults and who have understood the world in a particular way, and the people who have been marginalized and have been exploited for centuries are simply saying we do no longer want to be exploited and marginalized, and the response is we don't understand how the world works. But right, it's not that they don't understand how the world works, it's people are losing privileges and they cannot understand, and they refuse to admit that they are losing these privileges. And this is why earlier I used the language which we use at INA. It's a crisis of identity. It's not that people do not understand, it's less that people do not understand the world, but more about they want the world to function how it always functioned. But in order to continue to benefit from the privileges that the whites, and whiteness here is not simply only about color, whiteness is also an institution, but in order to be able to continue to benefit from the privileges that whiteness has afforded for millennia, some need to be exploited, and those who are exploited are simply saying, no, we do not want to be exploited. And I'm so happy that you raised the point of you don't see women taking to the streets burning down things, or you don't see black and brown people taking to the streets and burning down things, or you don't see let's say Cameroon or Nigeria saying, okay, you know what, I'm going to invade this country because I'm simply unhappy with how the world functions. So we keep on trying to explain white violence, whereas we should be challenging white violence and say, no, this is simply unacceptable, and we need to understand the world in a different way. And that is what I really just wanted to contribute to this discussion, is we need to confront white violence and whiteness as an institution, and rather than trying to continuously problematize why people are simply unable to understand that the privileges that they have always benefited from can no longer continue to exist.
Thank you. I think we will wrap up now, but allow me a couple of minutes just to reflect on the local context, especially this area and my upbringing too. If you go out the mosque, this centre, go on Whitechapel Road, if you go left, 2 minutes, you'll go to a park called Al-Tabali Park. This park was named after a Bangladeshi person who was the first victim of racism and Islamophobia in this country. He was killed in 1978, brutally murdered. And that's why this park is called Al-Tabali Park. Most of the gathering in this area happens in this park. Go 10 minutes on the right side and a little bit on behind, the Battle of Cable Street took place. In 1936, the fascists were defeated because local people rose up, black, white, everyone, working class, rose up against the fascists, and they defeated them. So this area has this history of coming together, fighting racism, fighting fascism. I've experienced this. I know Adam is there, those of us who grew up in this area, Jahid and others who grew up in Tower Hamlets. The 80s was different from what it is today. When we used to go to school, we used to get beaten up. We used to get spat on. We used to be called packies. Our black friends were called the N-word. This was common every day. I literally got beaten up, set aside here at 3 o'clock daytime by National Fronts, skinheads. Every other weekend we used to see a coach full of National Fronts with their Dr. Martin Boots, combat gear, skinheads, walk past the mosque, basically provoking us, throwing stones at the mosque. We could not come out on the weekends because they were in their coach loads walking down the streets and causing problems. This was a reality. We're seeing some of that today now in the riots that happened in summer. But as a community back then, we were very new. We were, evolving. We were settling in. So the government at that time decided to divide and rule us effectively. So you're Bangladeshi, stay there. You're Pakistani, you're Nigerian, you're African. So we were not seen as one community. We were seen as different communities. And the government found it very convenient to work with us in that way because we're not a powerful base. But later on, when we had enough, because our grandfathers, our fathers, they came here with little English language, little know-how of how society functions. But us as growing up, we had enough. And I remember in 1993, outside the mosque, there was a rally called the Youth Connection. And I remember, young people, maybe 10,000, got together, walked down the streets from Bethnal Green, Whitechapel, Brick Lane, Shoreditch, all the way. And we actually fought back then. We physically fought back the National Fronts. Before then, if you did that, you were arrested, you were seen as extremists. But this was the only message, this is the only method they understand, and we did that. Fast forward early 2000, the EDL, Tommy Robinson, tried for 7 years to come in front of this mosque to protest. Every time they failed. Why? People like David, Christian community, Jewish community, all came together, standing in front of the mosque, saying, this is our mosque. A rabbi, an imam, a priest, imagine that. Standing together, saying, this is our mosque, we'll defend it. So much so that one of the local reverends, Reverend Alan Green, was known as Imam Green, because they're so regular here. He's addressing meetings inside and outside. So because of that collective work, different faiths and different communities, the EDL effectively collapsed. Then he went on this new journey of rediscovery, joining the discredited Quilliam Foundation, and then that has another story on its own. So the message today is, this violence is happening, yes, but I think the solution is very obvious. We have to come together. We have to put our resources together. Those who are intellectuals, those who are community organizers, all must come together. We can't speak in silos, just the academics speaking in universities, community organizers speaking to themselves. There has to be a coming together. And I think this is what this meeting is about. This is what 32 Steps is about, and the organizations. So I think this will be a conversation that we can continue afterwards. And we've already discussed today that maybe we take it to some of the cities outside London, not just in London, and we continue the discussion. So thank you to everyone for coming today. It's been fantastic listening to everyone. What I really liked about it is basically it's straight talking, not basically codified, not being politically correct. Just say it as it is. Otherwise, there's no solutions. So thank you all. Maybe 1 minute message from everyone to conclude. Starting Sophia, quick 1 minute message.
Yeah, just to echo what you've just said, that was really, really powerful hearing about the historical resonances and also the resistance of just a month ago and the community coming out together. And this community, it's multiracial, it's working class, it's multi-religious, it's multi-class, multi-gendered, and I think that's where our power really lies, when we all come together.
I can't add anything to what these two have said. That was brilliant.
But Liz is my reference point for the last 25 years. We've really benefited from her writings and research, and when we thought there's nothing there, some of the reports she came up with really used. So thank you, Liz, for all the years of hard work, and it's paying off now. Mark?
Thank you very much. I think, going back to the recommendations of the report, it's building solidarity, social solidarity and unity. And that's a key message, isn't it? It's about fighting back against the demonisation of particular groups and just doing that all the time. And then I think that I've coming away with thinking I want to do more around challenging the politicians and the media, absolutely. And 32 Steps to Togetherness is about building coalitions and collaborations. That's really what we want to do up and down the country. We've only just started. We're working with a range of different organisations, and we want more and more people to get involved and be part of that. And we've been very proud to work with ENAR and the mosque and the IRR, a range of different people that we're working with across the country. And it's quite a privilege to do that, but there's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. Thank you.
Thanks to everyone who joined us here today. I just want to echo what everyone has already mentioned, and and to add as well that we need to be able to learn from what has been done in the past. Learn lessons, the good and the bad lessons. We also need to look for new ways of activism and doing social work. Build coalitions, broad coalitions across different issues, and build communities and not cages. I saw this poster today at the Pelican House. I visited, and there was this poster on the wall: build communities and not cages. And I think that is a message that I really took with me when leaving the Pelican House. And really thanks to Mike and your team and everyone who has been involved in this tireless work. Thank you all.
Thank you. And it just remains for me to say thanks to the speakers for coming, especially Liz, Sophia, Emmanuel, all from Brussels. Amina's left now. She's got another event tomorrow. And obviously to our guests here in the audience, thank you for coming. Also on behalf of the Civil Society Consulting, European Network on Religion and Belief, Institute of Race Relations, 32 Steps, and the Cordoba Foundation, thank you all, and let us continue the journey. Let this not be just one event. Thank you.